It's 7:04 a.m., and 9-year-old Anna Covlin is calling her father, who conveniently lives in an apartment just across the hallway, frantic. She had just found her mother face down in a bathtub filled with bloody water. Her father rushes over. He pulls his estranged wife's lifeless body out of the tub and begins performing CPR. He calls 911 and they instruct him to continue the CPR as they dispatch emergency personnel to the scene. But it won't do any good. His millionaire wife has been dead for hours. And the mystery surrounding her death, as well as the multiple, insanely disturbing events that follow, are ones that will most certainly make you question how such an extreme level of evil can even exist. Welcome back to Crime A to Z, where we detail cases and criminals from their very beginning until well after other reporting ends. If you've watched our channel, you've seen that we've covered some of the worst humans to have walked this earth. But nothing prepared us for what this man did. So, if you thought that killing his wife and framing his 9-year-old daughter for the murder was the extreme part of this case, you ain't seen nothing yet. Let's go. Shelley Minna Danishevsky was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey on July 13, 1962, to parents Joel Danishevsky, a butcher, and Jelene Danishevsky, a homemaker. Joel was the son of Polish immigrants and was also a rabbi, like his own father. The couple had 3 other children, Shelley's sister Eve, and brothers Josh and Philip. Growing up had its challenges for Shelley. When she was 3 years old, she was badly burned by boiling water simmering for tea that left permanent scars on her neck and chest. She would be self-conscious about it for her entire childhood, wearing high-neck tops and long sleeves, even during the hottest summer days. She eventually began binge eating to compensate for her insecurities. That resulted in weight gain, which increased her level of self-consciousness even further. Her grades began to slip in school, and she was generally considered not quite as driven or successful as her siblings. Then, once in college, she moved into the dorms and began dropping her weight, and her confidence increased. She began dating, but all of her dates were, essentially, a mess, according to her sister Eve, who was also her best friend. After college, Shelley's father encouraged her to consider getting into finance like he was. She did, and began working at UBS, joining her father and brother Philip. It was while she was working as a successful wealth manager at UBS that 35-year-old Shelley met 24-year-old Rod Covlin at a Jewish singles event in 1998. Roderick, who went by Rod, was a stock trader and professional backgammon player. Despite him being 11 years younger than Shelley, they hit it off, and they were married in a matter of weeks. They would actually have married much sooner than that, had Shelley's sister not talked them out of eloping on the very night they met. The couple would go on to have a daughter named Anna 2 years later, after which they learned that Shelley could not conceive again. Wanting more children, they decided to do so using a donor egg. It resulted in their son, Miles, being born in 2006. Rod would regularly ridicule Shelley about the fact that they had to use a donor egg, and would even taunt Miles that Shelley was not his biological mother. Rod had also started having an affair with a woman named Deborah Oles, a married mother of 3 who he met at a backgammon event. After Rod came home smelling like perfume one morning at 6 a.m., Shelley had finally had enough of his womanizing and mistreatment, and the couple separated. But not far. Rod moved across the hall into a smaller apartment paid for by Shelley to allow him easy access to their 2 children. Shelley had the locks changed on their door in May of 2009. The problem now was that Rod, who had been either chronically unemployed or only marginally employed throughout their marriage, had lost the steady cash flow that he'd grown accustomed to, while he was draining Shelley's funds. So after the split, Rod watched Shelley thriving both professionally and personally, gaining new clients and meeting new men, while his own situation only became more and more bleak. So Rod became angry and desperate. He began tracking Shelley's comings and goings and reading her emails. He even tried to weaponize the children against her. In a wild attempt to gain custody of the children, he took his 3-year-old son to the emergency room and coached him to lie and falsely tell hospital staff that Shelley had sexually abused him. As a result of the stunt and other concerning actions, it was ordered by family court that Rod could only have supervised visitation from that point forward. As the couple became embroiled in a bitter divorce and custody battle, Rod's acts of aggression continued and became more violent. And in October of 2009, Shelley told her doctor that Rod had put his arm around her neck during an argument, choking her, and threatened to kill her. And on December 29, 2009, Shelley emailed her attorney to begin the process of cutting Rod out of her will and making her kids the sole beneficiaries to her fortune. Just 2 days after sending that email, which Rod likely intercepted, Shelley was murdered. Police receive a 911 call that a woman was found face down in a bathtub and is not responding. The man on the other end has been performing CPR. The operator instructs him to continue until emergency personnel arrive. They do, but it's too late. Shelley Danishevsky is dead. By the time the fire department arrives, just 4 minutes after the 911 call, Rod has covered most of Shelley's nude body in a blanket from her nearby bedroom. Responders could see that Shelley had bright red scratches on the lower part of her face and a small purple injury on the left side of her bottom lip. Rigor mortis had set in and her joints were completely stiff, indicating she had been deceased at least a few hours. Police arrive shortly after emergency workers, and Rod begins telling them what happened. That his 9-year-old daughter called him in a panic. He rushed over to find Shelley's lifeless body, face down in the bathtub full of bloody water. He pulled her out of the tub and began CPR. He surmised to police that she must have slipped and fallen in the tub, grabbing hold of the cabinet that was partially off its hinges on her way down. A tragic accident. The accident theory seemed plausible enough at the time since the water was bloody and the dangling cabinet door did seem in line with Rod's assumption. But the medical examiner thought otherwise. The moment he saw Shelley's body, he thought she was killed and wanted an autopsy carried out immediately. But her Orthodox Jewish family opposed the autopsy, citing religious reasons and assuming it to be an accident. The medical examiner spoke 3 times to the chief medical examiner to try to get the family's religious objection overruled, but he was unsuccessful. And Shelley was buried within 24 hours after her death. But it didn't take long for questions to surface surrounding Shelley's death. For starters, Shelley had just gotten a keratin hair treatment that day. So taking a late-night bath and getting her hair wet would have been out of the question. Also, Shelley was not a bath taker. She took showers. And how did she get the scratches on her face? Also, a private investigator hired by the family, whose suspicions were mounting, reported that the force needed to have pulled the cabinet away from its hinges would have been far greater than any force Shelley could have exerted. Those inconsistencies, along with the police discovering Rod's alleged past history of assaulting Shelley, the fact she was about to write him out of her will, and that he was draining her bank account due to his online backgammon gambling addiction, were enough to order Shelley's body exhumed, which they did 2 months after her death. Now able to perform an autopsy, the medical examiner positively identified that Shelley's U-shaped hyoid or neck bone had been broken, an injury consistent with a chokehold that one might perform in martial arts. Shelley had been strangled. That finding was consistent with the burst blood vessels in her eyes, noted and photographed just after her death, another indication of strangulation. And the fact that Rod held a black belt in Taekwondo was not lost on investigators. They officially ruled the death a homicide. With the official cause of death now a homicide, the investigation took on new meaning. But given that the death was initially considered an accident, police hadn't obtained any DNA, fingerprints, interviews with neighbors, notes, or even a search of Rod's apartment across the hall. So they had little to no evidence to compare anything with forensically. As a result, police struggled to find direct evidence linking Rod to his wife's murder. But while they were investigating, whole new levels of despicableness would begin to develop. With Shelley dead and Rod only allowed supervised visits, the couple's children were sent to live with Rod's parents, David and Carol Covlin, in Scarsdale, New York. Rod would move in with them soon afterward as well. But the living arrangement was problematic, to say the least. The fights and the animosity were rampant and heated. In one particular conversation recorded by Rod's girlfriend, Deborah, both sides' feelings were made clear.
Because you steal from your children. You stole before.
You're stealing their college money.
They won't be able to get to college by the time you're done with them. And you said you didn't care if they went to college. Why don't you tell Anna that every penny you're spending right now is her money and Miles' money?
That Shelley
Wait.
worked.
Hold on a second, Anna. I'd like you to come here. Hold on a second. Come here, please. Yeah.
Because you haven't
come out here.
worked 5 years in the 12 years you were married.
Could
You never worked. Your mother worked her off for every penny that he's spending. Let me tell you, the Danishevskis are not wrong. They may be wrong about something, not the money.
Okay. What you're saying now, what you are saying now in front of Anna and Miles, okay, will ensure that you never see my children again if you continue. Okay?
You threatened us with
No, I'm not threatening. I'm telling you, excuse me.
By October 1st.
Okay, evict me.
You know what, Anna?
Excuse me?
I spent $1 million of my money to make sure you didn't go to the Danishevs.
And if you thought the conversation between Rod and his parents may have traumatized his young daughter, that was there for the whole thing. Buckle up. By the time 2012 rolled around, Rod and his parents continued to have altercations, and Rod's temper often led to physical fights with his parents, even his mother. During that year, his parents were officially granted custody of the kids, and they obtained a restraining order against Rod. They also made good on their threat to evict Rod, including locking him out of the house while keeping the children. Rod was furious. Although he was indeed burning through his kids' college funds, treating them as his own personal ATM to the tune of more than $80,000, he was desperate to remove the two people standing between him and his dead wife's money unfettered: his parents. So he began hatching a plan to make it happen. His first idea was inspired by episodes of Breaking Bad and Dexter. He and his girlfriend Deborah researched the rat poisons mentioned on the show, while Deborah, who would later become the prosecution's star witness, secretly recorded the conversations. He then conspired with his daughter Anna to be the person to spike her grandparents' tea with the poison. There are conflicting reports about why that plan was aborted. With that plan out the window, he thought of setting his parents' house on fire, rescuing the kids, and leaving his parents to burn inside. Then, when that turned out to not be feasible, he moved on to Plan C. Dressing up as a black man, pretending to be a door-to-door surveyor during the election, then issuing a lethal karate chop to his mother's throat when she answered the door, killing her. Deborah had even driven him to a costume shop where he purchased a, quote, black man wig and black makeup. She was able to talk him out of the plan. Plan D. Once Anna turned 14, whisk her to Mexico, where marrying at 14 was legal, and pay someone $10,000 to marry her. That would emancipate Anna from his parents so that he could take control of her money. But logistically, that couldn't happen for another year at that point. But he wasn't out of ideas to get custody of his kids and their money just yet. And his final two ideas were unarguably the most disturbing imaginable. The next one involved Anna framing her grandfather for rape. And it unfolded with yet again Deborah in the fold. On January 14, 2013, Rod instructed Deborah to deliver a handwritten letter to his daughter at school, but he made her promise not to read it. Despite that promise, as soon as Deborah arrived at the school, she opened the letters and took a picture of each page. They were back in the envelope by the time Anna came into the car and began reading. Rod had intentionally written the paragraphs of the letter out of order, then strategically placed numbers and arrows so Anna would know the order in which to read them. The letter first tried to place blame about the rat poisoning scheme from himself to Anna by implying that it was all her doing. He wrote, "I only thought of this because you told Deborah you wanted to poison G and G, and I am afraid that you might do something like that at some point." Then he outlined how she should lie about statements she previously made on a self-deleting messaging app called Wicker in case they're ever discovered, including one particularly disturbing statement that will make more sense once you know the premise of the rest of the letter. And lastly, the unthinkable. He painstakingly and nauseatingly outlined what no father should ever outline to his 13-year-old daughter, precisely how to falsely accuse her grandfather, Rod's father, of rape. Right down to how to use what he bought her for the elaborate lie, and much, much more. The realization of which makes her initial statement on Wicker even more troubling. He had even conspired with her beforehand to have her grow out her fingernails for maximum damage when scratching her grandfather's face and to obtain as much evidence under her fingernails as possible. Once Anna finished reading the letter, according to Deborah, Anna confirmed a few details with her, then stated, "I think I can do this." Deborah said that she tried to talk Anna out of it, but that the young girl was determined, stating, "I don't want to disappoint Daddy." And so the plan was actually in place. And when the time came, Rod eagerly awaited a call from police, telling him that his father had been arrested. But the call didn't come. Instead, his daughter called him and said, "Daddy, I couldn't do it." Her brother and grandmother had been home, foiling the plan. Rod was furious that another plan was down the tubes. And if that despicable grandfather framing plan wasn't dark enough, Rod had one final ace in the hole. And this one he actually carried out. As the Manhattan DA's office turned the heat up on the investigation into Rod, he decided to execute the unthinkable. On June 25, 2013, court records show that Rod drafted a message pretending it was written by his daughter and addressed to her law guardian, Joanne Douglas. It was a confession. He placed the message in her email drafts folder, framing his daughter for the murder of her mother. It read in part, "She didn't just slip. That day we got into a fight about her dating, and I was still mad when I went to bed. I heard her go into her room and run the bath, so I went in and argued some more, and she told me to go back to my room, and I got mad, so I pushed her. But it couldn't have been that hard. I didn't mean to hurt her, I swear. But she fell, and I heard a terrible noise, and the water started turning red, and I tried to pull her head up, but she remained still." With increased scrutiny on his every move, Rod was hoping that investigators would come across the message sitting in his daughter's account. They did, but they didn't buy it. They quickly noted that Joanne's name was misspelled. They learned that Anna actually knew the correct spelling, and Rod did not. He spelled it the same way he had misspelled it in the forged message. It would take 6 years of investigation and information gathering against Rod, but in 2015, he was finally arrested, thanks in part to Deborah Olds coming forward to police. She and Rod had broken up in 2014, and she approached New York City detectives within a few months after that, bringing not only her verbal accounts, but several hard drives filled with messages and data from Rod's electronic devices. Missing, however, were several messages from the night of the murder between the two of them, which had been deleted. Rod's trial would begin in 2019. Prosecutors claimed that Rod, a Taekwondo expert, snapped Shelley's neck with a martial arts hold, staged the accidental drowning scene, then left, awaiting his daughter to discover her body. And Rod, being the clever criminal that he was, promptly provided them with some support. In jail, security footage captured him flexing an arm in a manner consistent with a chokehold. It was clear and precise. Prosecutors used the recording during his trial to demonstrate his knowledge of the technique. Deborah testified about what she knew, including about one of Rod's plans to murder his parents and how he planned to carry it out. Rod's defense team argued that Deborah was a woman scorned, and that regarding the forged message, Anna could, indeed, have written the message herself. Since minimal evidence was gathered from the scene, much of what the prosecution had was circumstantial. And they received another blow when the judge ruled that many of Rod's murder plots against his parents, the forged confession in Anna's drafts folder, and numerous other of his misdeeds would not be allowed to be presented in court unless Rod himself were to take the stand. He did not take the stand, so many of the murder plots were not presented. Prosecutors worried, but in the end, it didn't matter. In March of 2019, after a 9-week trial and 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Rod Covlin guilty of the second-degree murder charges he was facing. Then came the sentencing. And for that, Rod's then 19-year-old daughter, Anna, wrote a letter supporting her father to be read in court by her grandmother, Rod's mother.
My mom slipped, hit her head, fell unconscious, and drowned, just like the medical examiner said when he found her.
He was sentenced to 25 years to life, but he still maintained his innocence. Rod Covlin appealed his conviction in 2021. In 2022, he lost the appeal, and the conviction was upheld, with the court explaining that there was overwhelming evidence of the defendant's guilt. As a result, the DA's office issued a statement stating they hope that the appeals court ruling upholding the guilty verdict brought closure to the family. That statement prompted Anna, who was 21 by that time and going by a different name, to respond. She issued a statement that read, "I am Shelley's family. My brother is Shelley's family. And this decision has not brought us closure. My grief is not aided by the malicious, unjust imprisonment of my father," she wrote. She went on to describe how the loss of her mother was compounded by the loss and unjust conviction of her father. Then she outlined the events of the evening of the murder, stating, "I remember it like it was yesterday, so allow me to tell you what truly happened that night, and how your office's prosecutorial misconduct has destroyed me and my family every day since." We could not find any reference to the full contents of her description of the night's events, but reports state that she feels with true conviction that her father did not murder her mother. Roderick Covlin is currently serving out his sentence at the Attica Correctional Facility in Attica, New York. There have not been any reports available on his life in prison since he's been incarcerated. He won't be eligible for release before October 28, 2040. A detective from the New York Police Department made an observation regarding Rod Covlin, stating, "I worked on 1,500 murder cases in the years I was in the police department. He's the worst human being that I ever had to encounter because he did so many bad things to his own children in his infinite greed." That about sums it up. What do you think of this case and this man? Do you think there's a possibility that he's innocent as his daughter so strongly believes? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like how we presented this case, we'd really appreciate you hitting like and definitely hit subscribe so you never miss a single video.